Welcome to the Lean Solutions Podcast, where we discuss business solutions to help listeners develop and implement action plans for true lean process improvement. I am your host, Patrick Adams. Hello and welcome to the Lean Solutions Podcast. My returning guest today is Tim Schipper. Tim is a graduate of Calvin College and the University of Michigan. He has a Bachelor's of Mechanical Engineering and a Master of Science. His career has spanned 40 years and includes time as a tool designer, engineering educator, engineer, IT manager, lean expert, author, and Agile Transformation leader. He has led lean transformation since 2003 in areas of manufacturing, office process, IT development, global product development, new business initiatives, government agencies, and nonprofits. He currently works for Steelcase right here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Tim has also written 2 books on the topic of lean: Innovative Lean Development, How to Create, Implement, and Maintain a Learning Culture, and The Highly Effective Office, Creating a Successful Lean Culture in Any Workplace. Welcome back to the show, Tim.
Well, thank you, Patrick. It's really wonderful to be back.
Absolutely. No, it was great. Before we hit record, we were talking a little bit about your past episode and just had a lot of great engagement with that episode. And so if anyone's interested, you can go back to season 1 and search for Tim and find his previous episode. But today we're going to talk about something a little bit different than we talked about last time, and specifically around Agile, Lean and Agile. So Tim, obviously, as I mentioned in your bio, you have a vast amount of experience in lots of different areas. But the one that I think is super interesting to me is the work that you've done in the office and also, in IT and just the back end side of things. But before we get into some of that, what do you appreciate about Lean? The more experience that you have, the more that you practice it, the more that you see others practice it. What are your thoughts around just Lean as a whole?
Yeah, so I've been involved with Lean since 2003, which is when we first started to apply it in the office. And of course, it was even before that in manufacturing, and it started in the 80s and 90s. But what I came to appreciate more and more is how much it is about continuous improvement and every individual doing continuous improvement. You can talk a lot about the tools. You can talk about 8-step problem solving. You can talk about, Kaizen events and value stream mapping and all the things that we've done over the past years in Lean. But it really all comes down to continuous improvement. And are people on a regular basis, like, that word continual, are they on a regular basis making changes and improvement? And it's all about the workers doing that. So I appreciate that probably the most is the core part of Lean that a lot of us miss.
Yeah, I think there's so many organizations that missed that over the years, and I think just as of recent, it seems like many companies are starting, Western companies specifically. I guess I'm talking about in the Western culture, but many companies are just now starting to realize that Lean success really doesn't depend on the tools, that it's really about what's behind the tools and having this, this real culture of continuous improvement, a learning culture where people are always interested in, what's next? How do we continue to get better? How do we continue to improve? Why do you think it took so many companies, and again, like you said, there's still companies that struggle with it, but why do you think it's taken so long for companies to understand the power behind the tools, not necessarily the tools themselves, but that continuous improvement mindset?
Well, I think it's all about culture change. The culture itself has to change within the organization, and that's the most difficult part and probably the slowest to evolve over time. And this idea that we're going to get this critical mass of people that are all doing change and continuous improvement. And as I think back to some of the early stories, from the NUMMI plant that was the success story from GM, and then how much the workers there's the same workers, the same managers in the NUMMI plant, but Toyota came in and turned it around because they changed the culture. And I think that's the thing, because it's maybe the hardest. It took the longest for companies to come around and realize, yeah, that is really at the heart of what Lean is.
Right. Yeah, so true. If you could say, I mean, there's many different levers that we can pull to try to have an impact on culture. But could you put your finger on like maybe your top one or two? Like these are those areas that are definitely going to have a massive impact on culture. If you just focus on, maybe making changes to this area or this area, that will have a drastic impact on creating a continuous improvement culture. Could you throw out like one or two of those levers?
Yeah, I don't know if I have a absolute golden lever to pull, but David Mann used to talk about culture as being a hypothetical thing. You can't change the culture itself.
Mm-hmm.
So what is it you can change? You can change the behaviors and the triggers. So one of the successful things we did over the years is, pull the right, when you see that trigger, pull that handle. And triggers could be like a repeating problem that you see in the office or whatever group you're focused on. And then if you see that event, you pull the lever. You say, okay, now we're pulling the lever. We'll apply 8-step problem solving, or we'll apply PDCA, or we'll apply an A3 to that problem. And it's best if those triggers are closest to the customer, meaning you're causing some disruption to something downstream that's affecting the customer. And those are the most critical to increase your quality.
Right. Yeah, no, that's great. Great points there. And I like that you said that, you obviously quoting David Mann, but that culture is really, I like to say it's an output, and there are certain inputs, like you said, the behaviors, the actions of the people. And you can't change the output. The output is the output, right? I mean, everyone has the culture. It just happens. But to your point, you can change the inputs. You can change the behaviors, the actions of people. And a big part of that is obviously leadership. So, no, that's great.
It takes a lot of support by leaders for sure. And that faith that I should be working on these things because it's going to make a long-term difference. It goes back to the stop and fix behavior. It's like, do you really believe in that principle? The fact that you can actually pull the line, stop the production, and think about, we're going to fix this so it doesn't reoccur. So you're looking for those types of triggers. And in the course in the office, you don't have that and-on signal. You can't actually see the lights flashing because the line stopped, but the principle's the same. You look for those things that are equivalent to an and-on, and you want to, and that takes leadership support to make sure that you're looking for those things and then asking for the right behavior when you see it. Yeah.
What would be some examples in the office of what you would see and consider an and-on, or a way, a signal that you could use in the office that you would say, this is the signal, you have an issue, it's time to stop and fix this. Like, what would some examples be of what you would see?
So in the office, I relate it back to a different type of flow. So in production, obviously, we're focused on the flow of products through the plant, and materials and workers. But in the office, it's all about information flow. So you're looking for places where the information stops or is delayed, or perhaps has multiple handoffs because of passing through different gates. And usually when it has handoffs, there's rework and other types of things that are going on. So it's looking for that information flow, and then where does it get interrupted throughout the organization?
Yeah, that's great. And obviously there's different ways to develop some visual management, or different ways to see, the flow in the office, just like you can out in production. So, let's expand on that just a little bit, because I want to tap into Agile now and start talking a little bit about that. what would you say are some more similarities between Lean and Agile as we compare? Obviously, many people, when we think about Lean, many times our minds go straight to the production floor, right? And not necessarily in the office, or understanding what's happening in the computer and how that relates. So what would you say, what would be some important similarities between Lean and Agile that people can kind of make that connection?
Yeah, what I've realized after doing Agile now for I've been aware of Agile for probably 8-9 years, and then actually actively trying to help our organization put Agile in place for the past 5 or 6 years. What I've realized is there's incredible similarities throughout every part of Agile. And I had the privilege of being in a session with Jeff Sutherland. Jeff Sutherland is one of the people who signed the Agile Manifesto in 2001. So you're talking like over 20 years ago now for the Agile Manifesto. And recently was on a podcast with Jeff, and he said, we're celebrating the 30-year birthday of Scrum. So it's been around for a while now. And that's when they tried the first experiments of doing Scrum or doing Agile with a small team. But what Jeff says is Lean is one of the roots of Agile. So if you think about the tree of Agile, Lean was one of the roots that came out of that original Agile Manifesto in the ski resort in Utah back in 2001, of which Jeff Sutherland was one of the signers of that Agile Manifesto. And so as I've looked at it, there's so many different similarities. The one that it starts with the most is putting the customer as the focus of value. So this idea of, in Agile, what are you focused on? You're focused on customer value. You're focused on working product to make sure that you are delivering working product frequently. And then it's about the individual. So here we go back to that parallel with Lean. It's about the workers making the changes. In Agile, you empower the workers to control the team process, which is really kind of a radical idea, but it was already in Lean because you're giving that power to the production workers to stop the line, to change the process.
The most dangerous phrase in our language is "we've always done it this way."
There are an awful lot of posers out there. People that do Lean because they're mandated to do it. They think it will work.
How stable are you today? What are your goals? Are you generating small, simple improvements?
There are very few people that embrace Lean with their full heart, head, and emotion.
Let's imagine that your current output is top-notch. Is that enough to stop innovating and stop reaching for more?
Patrick's book uncovers the essence of what those organizations look like and what the posers look like. Caution, are you in the fake zone or the real zone?
Order your copy today at avoidcontinuousappearance.com. Right. Yeah, so true. And those are just a couple of similarities. And I was just thinking while you were talking, there may be a few people that are listening in that are hearing the term Agile for the first time. So I thought about that. We should probably back up just a little bit and maybe a quick definition of what is Agile and how do companies use it. Do you mind just kind of filling in our listeners on just a general kind of high level definition of Agile and how it's used?
Sure. No, I'm very happy to do that the best that I can.
Yeah.
So prior to the 1990s, everybody used pretty much a waterfall methodology for any type of development, whether it be product development or IT development, or you pick the thing that you're developing. It was a waterfall methodology. It had a very long arc as far as defining requirements, design, build, testing, and then showing it to the customer. And what people found is it wasn't serving companies and organizations very well, because you'd get to the end of that long arc and discover a lot of late changes, a lot of missed requirements, and a lot of rework and expense. And IBM's did some studies on this, and they found that 80% of projects are going over budget or over time. following the waterfall methodology. So what Agile does is it breaks down and you do short little cycles of plan, design, build, and test. And you do those in sprints. So you do those anywhere from 1 week to 4 week sprints. At Steelcase, we've settled on 2 weeks. We think that's a good number. And you keep doing those, but at the end of every sprint, you are checking if you've created the right value for the customer. So the end user is involved. And in that way, it's very adaptive. And because you're constantly delivering value. The other thing it is it's fairly lightweight as a method, because all you need to get an Agile team to work are the developers, a product owner, and a Scrum Master. And the product owner is all focused on what it is the team should do, and the Scrum Master is focused on the things that help the team do it, so that they're in charge of the team process.
Right.
And I should mention just briefly at Steelcase, we changed those names, product owner and Scrum Master, because we thought it didn't speak well to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we changed the name to Agile Product Lead and Agile Delivery Lead.
Nice. That's a good call out. I appreciate you mentioning that. I think that's definitely something that organizations need to consider for sure. And I love the fact that you are flexible with it, because there's so many times there are trainers or consultants or whoever out there that are like, no, you have to call them a Scrum Master. You have to do it this way. This is the only way that it's going. And I just sometimes I just think, a lot of times that's why organizations fail, is because they're not willing to be flexible and do something like what you just mentioned, change the name so that it makes sense for the culture, for the people, for the direction that you're heading. I mean, that's okay. If you're getting the benefits of the methodology of the tools in a better way, because you're making some adjustments to how you do it, then great.
Yeah, and we actually reviewed that change with Jeff Sutherland and JJ Sutherland. The thing that they mentioned to us, they actually changed backlog grooming, which had negative connotations, the word grooming, and they changed it to backlog refinement. So this whole idea of adapting over time, this is important.
Exactly. So true. And so I want to go back to our listeners that maybe are being introduced to this for the first time. Where would Agile be used in an organization? Is it product development? Is it project management? Is it only used in IT? Where and how is it used?
Yeah, it started out in software. There's no question about that. So the original Agile manifesto actually had the words working software in one of its values. They changed that later to working products. Because the methodology has been adapted to all sorts of different types of development. So anywhere where you have to solve a very complex problem and you have to do that in an adaptive way, that's where Agile can be applied.
Yes.
So it's been applied in obviously IT, but now more and more it's applied in other areas outside of IT. So other parts of the organization where they're trying to solve very complex problems. They have to stay connected to their users in order to do that. And so they can use Agile for doing that. There was a Harvard Business Review article about 3 years ago that talked about how Agile is being used from everything from the accounting department right up to the C-suites or the corporate top positions in teams. And they were using Agile to solve those types of problems.
Yep. So true. I see it being used more and more. And I love the short sprints and keeping the customer in the know versus waiting until the end and then delivering a final product or service or whatever it may be that they may or may not be happy with. We apply that simple thought process is like, okay, have we talked to the customer? Well, it's so early though. It's so, why would we, we got to get more work done on this before we bring, no. Bring them in, let them see the rough draft, let them be part of that, because they're going to give you, information that's valuable to direct you as you continue forward. So
Right.
that simple thought process, I think, is so powerful. What would you say? Yeah, what would you say? Going back to Lean and Agile, what is the central common element between Lean and Agile? Because we work with obviously a lot of companies that are deploying Lean into their organizations, and then they're saying, hey, what about Agile? Is that something that could benefit us, and how does it fit? So I just want to chat a little bit more about that. What would you say is the central common element between the two?
Yeah, so we talked about the first one, which was customer value and putting the user first. The other one is this whole idea of continuous improvement, and the fact that you're always looking at how to improve the team process. In Agile, this takes form in the form of a sprint retrospective. At the end of the sprint, you do the retrospective, and that's where you examine the team process and how can we do things better. And in Agile, you actually measure this because you're trying to increase the velocity over time of the work that you can get done. And again, I'll go back to Jeff Sutherland. One of the things he said is a team should be improving 10% every sprint. So you can imagine a productivity improvement of 10% every sprint. That's a big deal. And that's what the retrospective is supposed to do, is the team is constantly reflecting on their own team process and thinking about how can they do things more efficiently and better.
Love it. What does a retrospective look like? Like, are there very specific questions that you're asking for that, or is there structure around it? What does it look like?
A little bit of structure, not much. It's typically a pretty short meeting of anywhere from 30 to 90 minutes. It involves the Scrum Master, or who we call the Agile Delivery Lead, and the team. The product owner or the Agile Product Lead is optional. But the team there with the Scrum Master is looking at the team process and asking questions, well, how did we do last sprint? Did we get the work done? Where did we run into problems? What are our tools like? Are we using the right tools? Do we need to adapt our tools? So it's not a lot of questions. It's just probably half a dozen questions talking about what went well, what didn't go well, and what do we want to change.
Yeah. So important. And again, I think this is a miss for so many organizations, that retrospective on anything, just asking those simple questions that you just mentioned. What went well? What didn't go well? What can we do next time to make sure that the things that didn't go well are going to go well the next time we do this? I mean, just a simple conversation around those three questions can be so powerful for any team, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure you've experienced that.
And it's the easiest one to skip, right?
Oh, yeah.
We have to go get more work done. We got to do.
Yeah. So true. We're done. Let's move ahead. We got other things on the docket. Let's and man, you're missing just there's some gold nuggets that can be pulled out of that conversation. So definitely a big one for sure. What about development, Tim? Can Lean and Agile be applied to development? Is that possible?
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen people do that. You can apply it to development, especially early phases of development, because what are you doing? You're solving problems, you're making decisions. So it has to be, a very adaptive process. In the first book that Mark Swetz and I wrote, we talked about rapid learning cycles and going through that plan, design, build, test phase, early on your really complex knotty problems, the very difficult problems you're trying to solve. And those rapid learning cycles, those are basically like an Agile sprint. You're just trying to go through and quickly learn as much as you can so that it'll inform the rest of the development. Mm-hmm. So yeah, definitely can apply sprints in any type of problem solving environment.
Yeah. And for so many companies that are working, or teams, I guess, individuals that are maybe listening in, that are working in development, sometimes they're like, well, how do we do these rapid learning cycles when we don't have a product, or we don't have anything in front of us? Like, how do we do that? Like, what's been your experience at Steelcase or other organizations in how to have those rapid learning cycles pushed up front in the process when you're just so early in the process. What do you do?
Yeah, so the answer is in something we borrow from design thinking, and that's to create early prototypes. And they can be very rough prototypes. Those can be sketches. Those can be simple models that you make in a workshop. Those can be very early representations. Sometimes you have to build two models. So it's a looks like model versus a works like model.
Yeah,
right? It's going to look like this. We can't quite get all the mechanics in it yet, but we can show you what the mechanics would look like eventually. And so you separate those and you create those very early models so that you can then bring the customer and say, okay, this is what we're thinking about. This is how it's going to work. In IT, sometimes those can look like just rough drawn drawings of the screen of the application, and say, this is what this screen's going to look like. And if you push this button, there's another drawing. This is what that screen's going to look like. And if you do these things, you're going to get this. So without investing a lot of code, you're getting a reaction from the end user very early.
Right. Yeah, that's great. And I want to I'm trying to think back to our last conversation where we talked about product development. And in your book, I believe you call out, hopefully I'm saying this right, the ilities. Did I say that right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about those and why those are important?
Yeah, ilities, those are the adjectives you typically use about describing what the customer is looking for, right? So, things like, movability, or might be something like adjustability, or some other ility. You think about those types of words. That actually came from Bart Huthwaite. So Bart was one of my mentors, since passed on. Sorry to miss him so much, but yeah, he came up with this idea of ilities and describing the requirements in the form of ilities, and then how well does your design meet those ilities? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, love that. And again, I believe we talked about that in our last episode. So if anyone's interested to go back and listen, we talked specifically about how to apply Agile to product development. When it comes to development, Tim, how do we measure success? What would be an important metric, in applying Lean and Agile methodologies to development? How do we know that we're heading in the right direction? How do we measure success for that?
Yeah, it all comes back to early customer involvement, and are you developing and delivering working product as early as possible? So take some thought, obviously, to break down a big project into smaller pieces that you can actually deliver, and get those in front of the customer and get that reaction. So that developing working product, one of the things Jeff Sutherland, they asked Jeff Sutherland, what would you change the most about the Agile Manifesto? And he said, we put a line at the bottom and it would say, yes, we really do mean deliver working product every single sprint. This idea that you're completing something, you're completing the work, and you're able to do that and do it incrementally as you go forward.
Yeah, well, and it's an opportunity to stop and reflect, like we talked about the importance of that, but also take a minute to celebrate, take a deep breath, and then move on. Move to the next phase. Yeah, that's important for sure. No, that's good. So going back to your the two books that you wrote, Tim, if someone was interested to grab one of those, are those available on Amazon? Is there a website they can go to get some information on those?
Yeah, they could go to Amazon. Those are on Amazon. You can also go to Productivity Press, the publisher, and order them there.
Perfect. Okay, good. So we'll make sure that we put those links in the show notes, and then that way, if anyone's interested to grab either of your books, they can go right into the show notes, grab copies of those. Innovative Lean Development and The Highly Effective Office, both highly recommended. Tim, it's been great to have you on once again. Love the work that you're doing at Steelcase and how you guys are applying Agile in lots of different areas within the organization, and just appreciate having you back on the show to share some of your your knowledge with our listeners.
Well, thank you, Patrick. It's been wonderful talking with you again. That's always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Lean Solutions Podcast. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe. This way you'll get updates as new episodes become available. If you feel so inclined, please give us a review. Thank you so much.